We will go ahead and call the Planning Commission meeting to order. Could we all stand for the pledge, and would you mind leading it?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Inez, may we have a roll call, please?
Chair Aaron Todd,
Here.
Vice Chair Cameron Carizales,
Here.
Commissioner Gary Cushing,
Here.
Commissioner Miguel Magallanes,
Here.
Commissioner Jamie Labor. Okay.
Thank you for that. We will move on to number 4, the oral communication, an opportunity for the citizen presentations or comments not related to agenda items, but within the responsibility of the Fillmore Planning Commission. Is there anybody here for that? No? Perfect. Moving on to number 5, the consent calendar. May I have a motion to approve the February consent calendar?
Gary Cushing, so moved.
Okay, we have a first and a second.
Second.
All right, we have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? Thank you. We'll move on to number 6, the public hearing. Looks like 6A, consideration of vesting tentative track map number 6053 and development permit 20-04 for a 134 residential lot development known as Creekside, and finding an exemption from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guideline section 15182 parentheses C and government code section 65457. Go ahead and turn it over to staff.
Good evening, Chair and Planning Commissioners, City of Fillmore. This item, as mentioned, is a residential subdivision. Make a PowerPoint here for you. It's called the Creekside Residential Subdivision. It's up in the North Fillmore Specific Plan area. And tonight we're basically going over a general assessment of the project and get your feedback. You're not going to be making a decision on the project tonight. The applicant is still working through some public improvement plans, and this is an opportunity for us to evaluate its consistency with the North Fillmore specific plan and inch it closer and closer to where it's a final design that can then be recommended for approval by your body. Ultimately, the approval will be with the City Council. There are 2 primary entitlements on this project. It's a development permit and a vesting tentative track map. The location, as I said, is in the North Fillmore specific plan area. That's outlined in red here on the screen. It's about 29.96 acres total. It's currently vacant. There's a few trees, weeds, and denuded areas. It's zoned in the North Fillmore specific plan as residential exclusive. And with residential exclusive, obviously you can develop residential. And it also allows for, it's basically single family homes and affordable housing to meet the state requirements. So as I mentioned, the 2 primary entitlements are on your screen here. The vesting tentative tract map that basically just subdivides the land. The land would be subdivided under this map into 134 parcels, an open space lot, well, actually 2 lots, with dual purpose for drainage control and recreation, passive recreation mainly, roadways, related public improvements, and a bicycle path. The development permit is what will authorize them to go ahead and do the construction and the overall layout and those development standards that go with the lots. A little bit more background on the entitlement. As I said, the tract map is must be consistent with the Subdivision Map Act as well as sections of the Fillmore Municipal Code. The Municipal Code requires certain design improvements to be preliminarily approved. The application, once they're submitted and reviewed and approved through engineering, will be that much closer to where you can make an actual recommendation. All of those will be coming forth hopefully the next time we get together. Sticking with the subdivision, with the vesting tentative tract map, it establishes a density overall of 4.52 dwelling units per acre. That's consistent with Measure I, which was adopted in 2008. Measure I established a maximum density for the North Fillmore specific plan of 5 units per acre, so the project as designed is consistent with the density. Green and open spaces is currently calcing at 3.76 acres. Streets would make up about 7.4 acres, including internal streets and a portion of Good Enough Road, which would be improved and dedicated to the city. And of course, the 133 lots ranging in size from 5,000 square feet to over 12,000 square feet. Lot 134 is this irregularly shaped lot at the very north perimeter. That's a rather large lot, relatively, at 4.43 acres, and that will be for a custom home. It won't be a tract home, and that's to be determined later. General overall site amenities as provided in the tract map. Open spaces to the south of the project with a bike path that traverses through there, bisects the open space area and connects on both ends. A bike path that would be improved on Good Enough Road that'll allow residents to continue up past the project. We're also looking at, in conditioning the project, to provide a bike path connection that will take it from the open space area straight out to Good Enough Road on the south side. There'll be emergency access road to the south connecting B Street to the Sespe Creek levee, curb bulb outs for some pedestrian-friendly focal points, and restrictions on rear lots has been required by the fire department to ensure fire safety along that perimeter, just along the Sespe Creek levee. There's other civil improvements for roadways, storm drain basins, sewer upgrades south of the project. Overhead utilities will be undergrounded, and an access easement will be provided to ensure we can access well number 8. The landscape plan, this is a preliminary landscape plan that helps illustrate some of those features I talked about. You can see here on the south side of the project, left side of your screen, that's the detention basin, dual purpose recreation area. There's a trail that traverses through there with a bike path. The connection to the emergency access road is just to the south of that. And you can also see the improvements along Good Enough Road there. And there'll be street trees planted throughout the parkways. One issue that we're still working through with the applicant is that I mentioned the recreation area calcs out at, what did I say, 2.76? 3.76? And the requirement in the North Fillmore specific plan is to be at 3.84. So we're working on refining, sharpening our pencils and getting to that number. And a figure in the North Fillmore specific plan had a recreation strip along the levee there, which is not consistent with this design, so that's another aspect that is still to be resolved. This is the overall architectural site plan. So this includes a mix of all of the different plan types interspersed throughout. Not any one plan type is located next to each other, so they're pretty well diversely dispersed throughout. On the left of that screen is a typical of what the lot sizes would look like. We had a few issues with some of the lot standards in looking at this and relative to the North Fillmore specific plan, and that's outlined in your staff report. It's a rather large table. I didn't make a slide of it. I'll just go over a couple of the issues that we had. Some of the porch setbacks, when we take a scale to this and do takeoffs on the site plan, looks like some of the porch setbacks might not be consistent with the North Fillmore specific plan standards. Possibly a setback on one, maybe two of the lots at the rear. And possibly also the garages, but we're asking the applicant for some more dimensions on these lots so that we can ascertain exactly where they are. Okay. So again, we're just going over general guidelines in the North Fillmore specific plan, and in the staff report, we mentioned really two aspects that we're focusing on. Those are chapters 4 and chapter 5 out of the North Fillmore plan. Hopefully you guys have had access to that. So these are some of the big ones that we just wanted to make sure we brought to your attention as you're reviewing the project. You're noting some of these standards. This is relative to some of the public realm stuff, the lot standards, the specific plan really focuses on reducing garage presence, orienting homes, diversity in architectural styles, massing, articulation, roof forms, again, garages in various orientations, and reducing the garage dominance on the front elevations. And it also seeks porches, decks, and balconies and ways of maximizing the view shed. Overall review of the different plan types and elevations. There are 5 plan types, 1 through 5, different sizes. They go up in size up to plan 5. They're all 2-story. And the 4 elevation styles that were selected, which are consistent with the North Fillmore specific plan in their selection, the Spanish, bungalow, farmhouse, and modern. So there's a mix of 4. And you can see the number of units there. This provides an overview of, this is the front elevation. Shown here at the top are the rear elevations. These are typicals. And then at the bottom is the side elevation. So the left is the Sespe Creek levee. So that's basically your street scene. You can see the landscape trees. And you can see the separation between the two sides. So we'll go over the Spanish style, and a lot of this is in your staff report. Again, these are just general assessments relative to the North Fillmore specific plan. These are things that we're relying on your body as the reviewing design review sort of authority on the plan, is to look at some of these features. Some of the things staff wanted to point out as we went through the plan specifically are to look for in the Spanish. Specific things that are in the North Fillmore specific plan are called out here: roofs, pitches, parapet with cap, recessed windows, arched front door, windows, combinations along the front porch, veranda. Plan 3 was deemed to perhaps need a recessed garage, and possibly more columns and features and variety could be added to the Spanish style. On the bungalow, we reviewed that again with some of the specific guidelines that are in the North Fillmore specific plan, or the standard features. So combinations of street-facing gables brought into eaves to create a differentiation in style, exposed rafter tails, columns, bricks, 10-foot deep porches. We're looking for maybe some more dimensions to be shown on the plan so we can further assess that. And some of the siding just appears more uniform or singularly toned, so we're looking for a little more variety there, as well as in the types of materials. So we put the elevations all here together so you can see the bungalow in one feature. The plans separate them out by plan type, so we just give you a different look with this layout. Here's the farmhouse. So these are all 5 elevations of the farmhouse. And again, staff's review of these in relation to the specific plan identified a few things that we felt you might want to consider. Roof pitches, rafter tails again. Maybe they could mix in metal roofs, shingle roofs, steeper pitches, cupolas, trellises, divided lights in the windows, decorative shutters, or gabled roof. Those were some of the features, again, outlined in the specific plan that we thought you might look at. The modern elevation, here are the 4, plans 1, 2, 4, and 5. It doesn't have a plan 3. That's okay. Some of those features that we felt you might want to focus in on are bulleted here. There's also a narrative of this again in the staff report, looking for a little more differentiation. Overhangs, maybe more elaborate, more pronounced, dramatic overhangs, exposed roof beam supports, maybe some more asymmetrical shapes, smooth finishes as opposed to the stucco, just to try to differentiate this product from some of the other ones a little more. You can see that the Plan 1 and Plan 2 elevations look very similar to some of these when you look at the farmhouse or the bungalow. So some of the things we called out might differentiate these a bit more and add a little more variety and interest in the products. So that covers the 4 styles. I know the applicant's going to come up and give you their presentation on the styles as well. CEQA compliance, there was a environmental impact report prepared as part of the North Fillmore specific plan. So that document is in the books. There's an addendum also associated with that. This project it does adopt the mitigation measures in that North Fillmore specific plan. So being that it's a part of that plan, adopting that CEQA element, it's exempt under CEQA guidelines. Staff's recommendation tonight is to receive the staff report, open the public hearing and receive public testimony. You're at liberty to discuss the project, provide comments, provide direction to staff. And on our third recommendation, we may feel that we're maybe too far apart on this at this point, and you may want to suggest to us that on recommendation 3 that we renotice the hearing once we have a little bit more in terms of the public improvement plans and we have more specifics and we get closer, but that's open to discussion and we can discuss that with the city attorney as well. So that concludes my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions, and after me, you'll get the applicant to provide their case.
All right, thank you, Brian, for that. Does anybody have any questions for staff? I have.
Sure.
I have two, and you can just say north, south, east, or west if you remember on the map, the landscaping map. Where was Good Enough Road on that?
Let me pull that up, it's easier. I realize it's oriented a little odd here. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm just gonna twist it around. Can you still see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Good Enough Road is where my cursor is right here. And this is the entrance off Good Enough Road, obviously. This road's a dead end. Until future development. Future development just to the east of this project will continue that road out to Good Enough. That's in the broader scope of the North Fillmore plan.
So for this particular one, there's going to be one entrance and exit until construction on other tracks begin?
No, there'll be two, and I just moved up that landscape plan. This is B Street here at the south side. So there'll be an entrance and exit here at B Street, and there'll actually be an entry feature sign that will be coming in as part of the landscape design details. So that'll call that out as an entry. That'll be the primary entry in and out of the project on B Street. So most of the residents will probably use B Street. Probably this upper quarter will use Good Enough Road. We would guess.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's the only
So-
question I got now.
Yeah, so two, and then it loops around, obviously, and then a future road, there'll be three, once that project or property to the east develops.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Thank you for
Sure.
that one. Nobody else?
Yeah, I had actually a question about, can you bring that map
Sure.
back up? It was about that lot at the very top. You said it was a custom home at 4-point-some acres.
It's-
Would they be using that well road to enter that property, or how would they access that property? Is it that green area?
There's an existing, is it an existing easement?
Yeah, we own the property and the easements to the city to get to the well.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a strip you see there in gray. So that connects you to Good Enough Road. That will be the city's access to come in. The well is this white area here, and then trucks can back out onto the driveway of this future home
Okay.
to get like a little bit of a hybrid hammerhead is what we call it, where a truck can pull in and pull back out and get straight out to Good Enough Road. So they'll be driving behind the walls, the rear walls of those homes.
Okay.
Perfect. Anybody else?
One question, is there a timeline for that custom home to be built, or just?
No, I think it's, once the lot's created, somebody will come in at a future time, apply for a development permit once they know what that plan's going to look like, and staff will be able to review it in accordance with our standards at that time. But it will be a one-off. Usually when you're a merchant builder like Williams Homes, they have a replicated plan style that goes and gets constructed in bits, and it's more of a systematic production. A one-off custom home like that on this lot would be a different plan altogether. Yeah, so probably even a different contractor would build it, I would think.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Anybody else? All right, hearing none, thank you for that. So at this point, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Any public comment? No? No?
Yeah, so at this point, the applicant can give a presentation.
Okay.
And then if in terms of the 5-minute time limit, and that would be for members of the public. So
Okay.
the applicant can go ahead, give their presentation to the planning commission. Planning commission can ask the applicant any questions they might have of them. And then at that point, open it to public comment. I don't know if anybody from the public is here to
Okay,
comment
perfect.
though.
Okay. Good evening, Chair and fellow commissioners. My name is Nathan Keith with Williams Homes. First of all, congratulations. I know there was a turnover last month, and many of you are serving for the first time or maybe reserving, but congratulations to that. I think, right, Kevin? You may differ in a little bit. Really appreciate you having us here tonight. This has been a long time coming for our project Creekside. And I also need to apologize. Brian did a great job. Some of which we'll talk through tonight will be a duplicate, but that's just kind of how it happens now. So I apologize for some of the duplication slides and a little bit more on our take, but of course, happy to answer any questions. And once again, Brian did a great job, and we've been talking a lot to get to this point. A little bit about Williams Homes. So we're located in Santa Clarita, California. That is where our corporate headquarters is. We build all over the western United States with divisions in Texas, Idaho, Montana, Central and North California, as well as Southern. But our corporate headquarters is right down the road. We have a very good reputation abroad and specifically in Southern California. Right now, we have some Southern California projects that we're building. Williams Ranch is currently being built in Castaic. I welcome any of you to come visit it. We have models open. It's a beautiful site. If you want to see a little bit of how we build and what it looks like. We've built Rosewood, which is in Santa Paula, Oxnard Shores, and here in Fillmore, we built Edgewood, which some of you may be familiar with, to the south of town. So we're not unfamiliar with Fillmore. We've been around. Our intention, which is important from our opinion and hopefully to your guys's, is that we'll be building this project from A to Z. We're not entitling it, approving it, and then selling it off to pieces to other people that come in and cobble it together. We come in, we build what we're showing tonight and what we hope is a great project for the city, and we think it is. To back up before our project, though, I wanted to talk a little bit about the North Fillmore specific plan because it's important on how it's relevant. The North Fillmore specific plan was first adopted in 2006. Yes, that long ago. It was quickly, probably the right word would be that some of the residents didn't like the density. The original plan called for 700 units as well as mixed use, and some of the residents in the North Fillmore specific plan were not happy with that. A little known fact in California, you can actually do an initiative to fight that sort of approval. It's very rare, but in this case it did happen, and that was called Measure I, and it passed on the ballot in 2008. What that did is it reduced the density from 5 to 20 to 1 to 5 units and reduced the total count from 700 to 350. That's important because really what it means is that's what the people, the residents in the community want. They wanted a less dense project. That's what they were looking for in that area.
From that time, in between that time, Williams Homes actually bought the Creekside project in 2017, and we've been working with the city ever since that time to get to this point here tonight. A very important part of that process was, even though Measure I passed, the North Fillmore specific plan had never been updated from the original approval. So we're talking 14 years. It's a long time. 14 years means that we, or the previous owners, could not do anything with our land until the Fillmore specific plan was passed and was consistent with what the voter initiative had. That really made us focus to work with the city on the specific plan. That was the most important piece. That had to come first. I'm happy to say that in October of last year, the city council, after the previous planning commission at those times, and I think, Miguel, you were on that one, approved the North Fillmore specific plan as consistent with Measure I. So that gave the land use and the zoning, the CEQA clearance for the entire North Fillmore specific plan. It also produced a nexus study fee, an updated one, again, 14 years is a long time, to make sure that the public improvements were going to be paid fair share for not just us as a builder, but future builders. There are other parcels up there. Whenever they may pull the trigger, the city wants to make sure that they're paying their fees and the city gets what they need to make those improvements. So that happened, and it was great news for us, and we continued to work with the city. During that time, we weren't stopping. We've had 6 meetings with the various committees through the city, and they call that the Design Review Committee. So we've had at least 6 with the Design Review Committee, as well as I've been at dozens of meetings with staff as we've worked through the project that we're bringing for you today. Again, the North Fillmore specific plan, I'm almost done with this section, is a little bit larger. You guys some of you have seen this before, but just by way, you can see how much larger it is and what it includes. Our project, if you can see the mouse, as Brian showed earlier, is this northern portion up here. This is Good Enough Road as it comes down this way, and this is B Street as it enters in. But the entire specific plan is larger, and all the land use and zoning is dictated for that. Again, the best way and easiest way is to say that Williams Homes owns all of parcel Bs, and there's multiples, B1 and these Bs in here. These are ours, and this is again a figure from the Fillmore specific plan, and it dictates exactly the density and exactly the amount of units you're allowed to build. So you can see B plus B1, 134, hence why you have a 134 unit project in front of you today. We are planned to be and need to be consistent with the specific plan which the city has passed. So that leads us to our project. The Creekside project, you've seen this map a few times, happy to go back to it to reference at any point, and you'll see a few more maps coming into future. This is our vesting tentative track map. I know it's very hard to see on the screen at this level. I think you all were given handouts that are a little bit bigger. Those 2x3s make it a little bit easier to read. I also want to apologize, even since printing those off, there's always last minute changes that are happening, more textural tweaks or something to that effect. So that map is constantly being updated, but hopefully it served a purpose to give you a better understanding of our project. I just did a quick zoom in just to understand. There's nothing really to focus in on other than this is the B Street entrance. You'll see landscaping plans here shortly. These are the open space parcels as well as the first couple homes within the project and so forth. So this is a little bit zoomed in on the vesting tentative track map. This is our landscaping plan. Again, I share Brian's concern on the orientation. It's just the way the graphics are made, unfortunately. This is still B Street. It is coming up this way. Brian mentioned there's some monumentation that will be had. The idea is that you arrived at Creekside. We want to be proud of that. I'll make a joke just because we were talking about beforehand. There will not be a fountain that is not working as you drive into this project. I promise you that. The idea now is to start thinking through what makes sense in this area and how it looks. You want a sense of arrival. You want residents to be proud, and you want the city to be proud of what is being built in this area. Let's see here. We'll keep moving on to some zoom in. So again, there are going to be connectivity through here. There are trails that connect that will allow the residents to have walkability. As Brian mentioned, it's going to connect to various bike trails and various walking paths, and you'll see some of those shortly. We also are creating a emergency access road here, which will allow emergency vehicles access to the levee. My understanding is in the past, the city has had several emergencies that have happened on the levee, various health concerns, and fire has not been able to quickly access the attention they need to those people, and this will help bridge that gap. We also have taken a look at the plant palette, and this is just kind of the conceptual landscape. We want to make it a California native area. We don't want to come in and bring a bunch of exotics. This is not going to be a jungle that we're putting out there. It's going to fit in with the palettes of Fillmore and Southern California. That means drought tolerant. We will meet the state mandates for various landscaping plans, and there will be a more detailed, what they call construction drawing, CDs of those landscapes lot by lot as we move forward with this. But we will be consistent with what the state is mandating for plant palettes, the city, and being consistent with the drought tolerant and beautiful. It is still pretty, it's just maybe more unique to Southern California. A couple exhibits that I think were in your package, but I just wanted to speak at. During these design review committees, we sat down in this room with fire, with a city engineer, with police chief, and each of them got to take a little whack at our project. I make a joke about that because the reality is they're the experts in those fields. I don't pretend to be. So they're good things that they're asking us for. This is a fire setback. One of the concerns from the fire chief was how far was the setback from this creek right here and the homes in the backyard. Through that process, we were able to demonstrate what the setbacks were from the actual structures, not just to the property line, but to the actual structures. Some of the conditions that you'll see at the next hearing that are not quite finished yet will speak to that. Some restrictions of what people can build in their backyard. You can't expand the house past what will be approved from ultimately the city commission. That would allow somebody not to push their house out another 15 feet and potentially create a fire hazard by being too close to the creek. So all these things are being considered, and we're listening to city staff and weighing in on those. Another one was fire hydrants, where they're at, how the fire will access them, how often, not just on site, but existing. Fire is a very big deal in Southern California, so we start dialing these things in now, making sure we have enough fire hydrants throughout the project, making sure they meet fire's needs, and making sure that there's no parking signs in front of them so that fire can access them should there ever be the need to arise to that. These will not just benefit our community, but will benefit also the North Fillmore area in general as it's bringing services to that area. The connectivity and path, I wanted to spend a moment on this, and again, at the PowerPoint level, it is a little bit hard to see. Currently, there is a bike path here on the west side of the levee, and that's in this color here. There is a connectivity here to this neighborhood in the south that allows residents to walk there. I specifically want to focus on our project and bring a couple things up. Brian already touched on this area right here off Goodenough Road. We will be creating that bike path, redesigning that street, and doing what we call complete street there. On the southerly side, we're going to have the bike path. It's going to go through along with the pathway. We also will have connections into our neighborhood. These are these colors that will connect down. One of the conditions that the city is asking us to consider, and we're working through, is because we're unsure when this developer may or may not build, and right now it's currently owned by this lighting company. They're not a developer. They probably will sell it. Maybe to Williams Homes, maybe to another one. We could be the future builder, but since that's going to be a while, one of the conditions that city staff is asking us to consider is to build a bike path that would connect here to Goodenough Road. So that would go in years ahead of future building. And that would be consistent with the North Fillmore specific plan as well. These are some of the things as a builder we would like to consider, especially when they make sense for not just our future home buyers, but for the city and current residents. These are conditions to us that are project benefits and make sense to us. A little bit about project details. Again, I won't spend too much time as Brian did a great job. 29.5 acres, 134 units, of which only 133 are being considered. That future lot is not, we don't have a time frame for that. And it will have to come back through planning commission. The design review will have to be consistent. So right now it's only the 134, although the entitlement is for all 133, but the entitlement's for 134. Project density is consistent with the North Fillmore specific plan, and the lot size ranges from 5,000 to 11,720. The open space, and I do want to touch on this, Brian is correct. Originally, we were short a little bit on open space. We have reconfigured that, and I will talk about that shortly, but we have met the 3.84, and we will demonstrate that in the next Planning Commission package that will go to the next hearing. And I think you'll like where we captured that open space, or at least I hope you'll like where you hear that from. We're going to go a little bit of community benefits, both to us, the city, the residents. So we're going to be 133, of which another will be forthcoming, market units, which will count towards the city above moderate income of the RENA numbers. That's dictated from the state. Every city is scrambling a little bit to meet their RENA numbers. If you think about a city that's pretty built out down in LA, they were still handed X amount of numbers of units that they had to somehow produce, even if they didn't have space, which means density. City of Fillmore is no different, along with all the other cities. These are homes that will help the city meet their RENA numbers as we move forward. Again, I want to go back to the time frame. 14 years is a long time. We're excited to be here today because we want to be part of that process. The affordability component, there is an affordability component. You saw that in the staff's report. I'm going to speak to that a little bit later. It's satisfied with 16% or 15% inclusionary, and the North Fillmore specific plan speaks to that a little bit, as well as we hope the conditions will reflect and be consistent with that, and I will touch on that at the end. We've already talked about public trails. There'll be provisions and funding for public infrastructure, including improvements to sewer and water, not just for our project, but for the North Fillmore specific plan. There is some sewer capacity issues, and the part of this, the fees that we produce and potentially the work that we produce will not just benefit ours, but will benefit the community that's existing today that's at capacity, as lines will have to be expanded. A lot of times that doesn't happen until the first builder comes in because it's stagnant. We're that first builder, and that's part of what we're working with on the city through the conditions to make sure that that's a benefit. There's also the tax revenue for the city, and that's just always the case with new buildings. Architecture plan. You've had the packet in front of you, and I think Brian did a really good job. I do want to go through. I have brought our architect here, Mike Cottrell from WHA, who is the master of these drawings and has been doing architecture in Southern California for many, over 20 years, and has built all over Southern California and beyond. I'm going to have him speak a little bit more to this in a little bit later to answer some questions, hopefully pre-answer some questions of what was presented. I do hope that you guys appreciate somewhat of the variety that we've shown here. Brian is correct. There was a couple lot overages. We're in the middle of fixing that, and we will get there, and it will be consistent with the North Fillmore specific plan. I did want to speak about the homeowner views. We have 5 distinct floor plans that we've gone over. That means 5 plans. That I will just say that's very unique for a plan of this size. 134 units, you usually don't have 5. You usually would have 3, maybe up to 4. And we heard the city through the last couple of years. They wanted a variety. They didn't want the same home, every other home, where you only have 2 floor plans. We have 5 coming. Of those 5, we've talked about it already. We have 4 overarching styles: farmhouse, modern, Spanish, and bungalow. So if you're talking about a home is different almost every 5 homes, plus within those 5 homes, it's different styles, you're going to get a feeling of uniqueness as you drive through. And it's not the same home just repeated every other in the same style. Again, for this size of a project, that is very unique. I do want to correct one thing. We actually have 2 single-story homes, and three two-story homes. So it's not all two-story. What that means is, if you go back to this is a shot of each of the plans, so that when you're driving down the street, they're not all the same height, all the same width. You're going to see a variety. Some are going to have, you're going to see views and the hills behind them. Your neighbors are going to not just be looking right into bedroom windows. There are a variety that are going on there, and we have thought through all that, and the city's been instrumental too in their request on that. We have 15 total front elevations. That's just, again, saying we aren't going to be repeating. There's going to be 15 unique plans that could be seen from the front. That's very unique for this size. A little bit of variety. Plan 1's 35 feet wide, Plan 2's 36, and two plans are at 40. So you're going to be seeing a different size of it. It's not all one. Again, a little bit too much detail, I apologize, but I think it's important to understand the story behind this, that we aren't just throwing product up there, that we've thought through this. I do want to touch on a couple things. There's what they call the California building codes that we all adhere to, and they like to update these occasionally. What happens is, since the time that we've started to where we're at now, they've updated this code multiple times. That sometimes affects the creativity of what you're trying to build here. Why does that matter? Well, the state keeps mandating more solar or more wattage, which is great, green, but that takes away some of the pitches of the roof that you can do, because you need that space on the roof for solar. They're mandating more battery storage, or at least the opportunity to put in battery storage in your garage. That means your garages have to be bigger than they were before to fit that storage. These are, again, state codes. Same thing with water heater. This is the challenges that we face today to be in step with a specific plan or city ordinances and the state. You're always balancing that. And so we're trying to do the best that we can. And when a project goes this long, some of the things that we originally started with that were very creative get outdated, or the building code overrides. And unfortunately, some of those have to go away. That being said, we're very proud of this project, and we want to show, again, a little bit. I'm not going to touch on all these right now because you have these, and Brian did a good job, but these are the plans, the various plans that we went through of them, and we will spend more time on it. Again, I just want to get to a little bit of California CEQA. It was touched on the October 22nd, it was adopted. That means that we are exempt from the CEQA because it falls under the EIR and the equivalent of the approval there. So we are wholly consistent with the North Fillmore specific plan and the North Fillmore specific plan EIR. So that's great, great news. That's not always the case in projects. It makes it a little bit easier because you know that the impacts for this project have already been looked at and approved by the approving body. Because of that, because of the land use and because of the zoning, we fall under what they call the Housing Accountability Act, which is HAA for short, from the state. So the project is a housing development project under the HAA and therefore qualifies for certain protections. And this is state law based on the being consistent with land use and zoning. The city can only apply objective standards and not subjective. Objective standards are those with no personal or subjective judgment. It just means that randomly the city can't decide, you want a 5-story home because you just love a 5-story home. There's some protection with that. We're under and consistent with what the city has already approved. So there's a limited discretion to deny or reduce the density, and it's basically based on adverse impact to the public health and safety with no feasible mitigation measure. So that is in your consideration, but because we fall under the North Fillmore specific plan, I just wanted to bring this up as well, because we do fall under that Accountability Act. This is where I'd normally go in summary, but just briefly, and I want to be courteous of your time and of course welcome questions. I do want to address just a couple issues, or at least rebuttals to the city staff report, as I had not seen that until it was released, so I would have loved to have worked through it a little bit more. But the first thing I want to talk about was on the city staff report of number 5, where it talks about the affordable housing. And in here, it talks about what's been adopted or what the city's looking at, and this is page number 5 on the staff report. And at the bottom of the paragraph in the middle of the page, it says, the 20 affordable units have not been identified. As a result, the planning's consistency with affordable requirements cannot be determined at this time. I differ a little bit on that because I think that because the conditions aren't complete yet, we don't know where that's going to land. The conditions will dictate how that looks for the project. Yes, there is the ability to build those affordable housing, but there also is the ability to do ADUs or pay an in lieu fee, which specifically is talked about in a incompleteness letter that we were sent by the city, which I'll read into the record, where they sent it to us talking about affordability, and this is the language from the city. 15% of the allowed 133 units is required to be affordable. 8 units shall be designated as low income, and 12 are to be moderate income for a total of 20. The city of Fillmore recently adopted an inclusionary housing ordinance which would allow an in lieu fee. The city will need to adopt the in lieu fee through a nexus study with Williams Homes assistance, and the city has started that process. So this was an incompleteness letter we received from the city on how to address affordable housing. I would agree that nexus study is not complete yet for the in lieu fee, but it's something that can be accomplished, and there are ways to do that. Alternatively, in the North Fillmore specific plan, if you look under alternative remedies for affordable housing, it says the affordable units required herein may either be rental or for sale. Furthermore, inclusionary housing requirements specific to each parcel may be satisfied by the equivalent of the acceptable city council and approved in part. And it goes on, consistent with the provision of the governance, but not limited to, they can be construction of ADUs, which are essentially dwelling units, and a payment of in lieu fee. So my ask tonight, based on what the city staff report said that I think needs to be a little bit addressed, is that the final conditions that are brought to you would incorporate both the in lieu fee and the ADU as options to be able to build, which would be consistent with the North Fillmore specific plan, as well as the incompleteness letter we've received from the city in the past. So I do agree that it's not identified yet, but the avenue should be cemented in the conditions of approval, which will be before you next time. The next thing I would like to turn the attention to is on page 7 of the staff report, and this goes back to the open space, and Brian touched on this a little bit. Brian spoke on this particular figure, figure 20. And in the staff report, it says, in the figure 20, which I have on the screen, public realm includes an open space park strip along the westerly boundary near Sespe. This strip has not been provided in the current project plans and must be allowed before the city council finds this project to be. As Brian mentioned, we need to work through this. I would argue that while we are not showing that strip on our current tentative map, that tentative map has been reviewed for the last 2 years, and it was always well known that the backyards would go up to that space right there. We are not cheating out of the open space. In fact, we have taken that open space, which on this map is undefined. There isn't an acreage defined to that particular strip. It's a green line on the westerly border. That could be 3 feet, it could be 6 inches and still be green. I think we'd all agree that as a homeowner there, you wouldn't necessarily want a strip of green right behind your back fence where the other property is the levee owned by the county watershed. There is no other thing back there. There's an emergency road and there's a backyard fence. And so what we create by doing that is potentially just create a walkway for people to just walk behind people's yards and see into their backyards. We don't look at that as a great option. And furthermore, when you follow this green line, it dead ends into the city well area and into people's backyards. It doesn't even connect to anywhere. Part of what the specific plan talks about in the overarching themes is the emphasis aligns with incremental build out while assuring fully integrative outcomes consistent with it, right? Which is open space and interconnectivity right here. Under the 2022 amendment is interconnectivity in complete streets. Well, we're making the complete streets. We've shown the interconnectivity. This goes back, and I apologize to go all the way back, but it gives a really good view of it right here. This is the levee with the emergency vehicle access. This is the backyards of those homes that will back up to the levee. By creating a small pathway, whether it's 3 feet, 1 foot, or 6 inches, you are inviting people to walk here. This County of Ventura watershed don't allow and don't want people on this emergency access road. It's actually illegal to go on there. The bike path is on the west side. That is open to the public. This is not. We would argue that this space would invite people to go where they're not supposed to. To be consistent with the North Fillmore specific plan and to make sure we meet the requirements of that open space, we have integrated that extra open space into the community. You've heard Brian talk about gathering places. We have actually changed some of our lots and shrunk them and taken some of the lots that are on the streets and made those lots smaller so that there's more open space within the community for people to congregate. That means your neighbors will have a large rock to congregate at or mailboxes to congregate at, which is what we've been asked to do by the city. So we've moved that open space, again, undefined on that strip, and implement it into the project, which we think is more appropriate and will be better used by the residents, both in the community and outside of the community. So that's just my take on that one. We will continue to work with city staff, and we'll have that better solution on that. I'm not going to go through all the table 3. I agree with Brian. Some are very close. I think our garages are there. There are some porches we need to work through on those setbacks. But what I will assure you is on the compliance side, what you will see when we come back before you, and this is on table 3 of the staff report, where it says compliance, you will see yeses on that side. We will be in compliance with the North Fillmore specific plan. And we're not going to be here to try to argue if we're in compliance or not. We're going to try to get those lined up to say yeses. So lastly, I wanted to talk about generally what a specific plan is and then invite Mike to come up here to speak to a couple of the things. A specific plan is just that. It's guidelines to guide what is built there. You'll see a lot of words like should or where feeble or where able to or where feasible. Do a porch of this size. Make this, wraparound. Do an optional deck if you can. And absolutely, where we can, we are going to try to do that. We are running into some issues on porch sizes. The planning staff has asked us to consider 10-foot depth porches on all the units. We have put 10-foot porches on all the units, and we're running into setback issues. We had discussed with planning at one time about variances. If we can get a variance on setback for porches, then we would be able to put those 10-foot in. If not, then we're going to have to go with what the specific plan allows. And as you can see here, I'm going to show you 2 examples, porches and balconies. Down here at bullet point 3, it says 10-foot porch depths are encouraged, again, not mandated, they're encouraged when they're consistent with the architect style. But when you go to section 5.3.2, which actually comes before, I did vice versa, it says garage presence along with street shall be de-emphasized while front porches with a minimum depth of 6 feet are strongly encouraged. So again, strongly encouraged. What I'm trying to say here is we would like to do 10, but if setbacks prohibit that and we're too close and all of a sudden we're inconsistent, then we're going to have to go with 6 in certain areas. We're trying to look holistically at the site. We're trying to make it unique. We're trying to bring all these plans into it. Sometimes you're just not able. Again, I remind us that we're consistent with the number of units. It's not like we're trying to cram more units in than we're allowed. These are the freedoms a specific plan gives you. They encourage you, they guide you, they direct you to try to do something, and most of the time we can. Certain lots just aren't going to work that way. But you will see a project that we think is the best possible project, and we'll continue to work with staff as we come before you a second time, hopefully in April. With that being said, Mike, perhaps I'll welcome you up just to talk specifically through, and this will be the last, of just the styles. And Mike is our architect. He's much smarter at me on this than I am, and I would butcher it. So I'm going to allow him a chance, and I don't know which graphic you want, Mike, to go through a couple of these to address what staff has said in the staff report in hopes that, similar to what Brian said, you're going to take this back for consideration. That's the whole point of tonight. Us present, Brian present, we've worked together very well, and Kevin as well. And so we just want to share a little bit of our side in hopes that you see some of the unique aspects that we've added that we think are consistent with the specific plan, and we hope you see it that way as well. So, Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, hi, my name is Mike Cantrell. I'm with William Hesma-Hulch Architects. Happy to be here and answer any questions, and I'll just give a brief summary of what Nathan had mentioned about maybe the styles. I think what would be helpful, can I use your slides?
Sure.
Because you had the styles gathered together with the comments on the same slide. You know, architecture can be very subjective, right? We all have opinions. It's hard to say what's right or wrong, right? You may see something on the screen that you like and I may not like, or vice versa. Just keep that in mind as we go. And like Nathan said, specific plans, design guidelines, they try to guide us to help us get to a point to not only make everybody happy with what's being produced and provided, but the end user, the home buyer, to want to live there and enjoy where they take residency, because that's really the name of the game, right? They're going to live there primarily every day. So the comments from from yesterday, you know, this is a good example of, so we have 4 different styles. It's already been talked about. Not every plan shares those 4 styles. We have 3 styles per plan, the 2 single stories, the 3 2 stories. This is our Spanish style, and these are some of the notes. Features appear to be missing from the plans include. So I just want to try to help explain, in my opinion, of where I feel we're at. The first one being roof pitch specifications to meet a 4 and 12 pitch. Albeit there's no dimensions on here, that is where we start with a 4 and 12 pitch. So this is reflective of that, and we'll make sure that note is on the next package for the next meeting. Spanish style parapet with cap, recessed windows faces in lieu of decorative foam trim. As an example. So to touch on the specific plan a little bit more, you know, it does talk about not just the specific plan, but today's trends in general, being more green, being more sustainable, not being wasteful, things like that, right? So when you introduce recessed windows, and we do them, and sometimes we do them, that's extra framing, it's extra material that sometimes is deemed maybe unnecessary for that style, because Spanish style doesn't always have to have a recessed window, as one example, right? So when we want deeper recesses, 4-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, you'd have one side saying that's wasteful, it's extra lumber, it's extra materials, that's unnecessary for today's trending sustainability idea of how we may want to live, right? So that's one argument to that. The parapet with a cap, yes, sometimes that does happen. We don't do that as much because it stains, is one of the reasons why, right? Because you usually have sheet metal on top of that parapet cap, and then water comes down, and then it just creates a stain. So it doesn't weather well, in our opinion. And a lot of what guides me to do what I propose to do, and it's collaborative, it's not just me, right, is history of going through this over the years and the decades, getting buyer feedback, getting builder feedback of what's perceived as a good thing or wasteful or something that the home buyer may want. So that's just some of those thoughts on there. Arched front door or windows in combination with the front porch veranda. So you see on the Plan 3, we have the 2 arched elements at the porch there, and the Plan 4 does have an arched element there. It's not the door, no, it's a square top door, but we are introducing those arched elements on the porches. Recessed garage area and expanded arches porches section. We can clarify what that exactly means, but we do have 6 8-inch deep recesses at the garage door itself, which provides a little bit of shadow line. And then arches or column features and accents on Plan 4. So we do have the arch element at the porch, but maybe what happens is we take those 3 windows up top and we make those arched. The problem with an arch window is if it's operable, it doesn't work. It's got to be a fixed element, right? So if I would say, if we introduce more arches, maybe those 3 windows above that single-story element next to the garage, maybe that could be an arched element. The bungalow. These are the 3 bungalows, so it talks about combination of street-facing gables. So, you know, the Plan 5 has 3 large gables with an eave over the garage. The Plan 1 has 2. The Plan 3 has 3 with an eave. So I think we're kind of meeting that idea. It does talk about exposed rafter tails. We are not currently showing that. We do have stone as the base of the foundation of the home on all 3 of these. And then the siding comment, yes, to the point, we only have them in the gable ends. The feedback we get from, and everybody owns, rents, or lives in a house, siding scares buyers. And how does it weather? It needs to be painted, the upkeep of it, so the simplicity of not having siding everywhere doesn't mean we can't do that, but that's some of the rationale behind why they're mostly stucco-based with the gable end siding and the stone as a start point. And Nathan had talked about the 10-foot deep porches. Porches are great, right? They engage the street element, and not every house I feel needs to have one. The Plan 1 I feel feels sufficient as it is, but the Plan 3 and the 5, as an example, do have a porch. So that helps create variety of the street scene instead of kind of stamping the same solution everywhere would be some of that rationale. This is our farmhouse, so this is the agrarian style that is mostly dominant. All 5 plans share this style. Yes, the comments are on the next page. Roof pitches, exposed rafter tails, metal or shingle roofs, cupolas, trellis treatments over garages, divided lights and windows, decorative shutters, gable roof dormers. So let me just say a couple things. We do show a couple metal roofs on here. These little eyebrow roof on the upper left elevation has it's hard to read, but that darker metal roof there. This plan down here does have the metal roof here. So we don't have a full metal roof. We have accented metal roofs that we can touch here and there across the 3. This one here on the upper right corner has a metal roof over the porch. The cupolas, we don't really do that. It's not really trending today. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but we don't see or do a lot of that. The trellis treatment above the garages, we don't feel weathers. It gets old, it gets dirty, it drips. The sagging of the beam across the braces, because that's a 16, 17-foot span structurally, we don't feel that's appropriate. Again, some of this is subjective, right? Just throwing out their ideas. Decorative shutters, I don't feel that's appropriate to this type of farmhouse. A traditional farmhouse, maybe. This is trending more towards a contemporary flavor of farmhouse. And in the specific plan, just to touch on, it does talk about craftsman bungalow, Spanish mission, agrarian mid-century, and contemporary versions thereof. So this is our contemporary spin to that farmhouse. It's been very successful this last 5, 7, 8 years, and we feel it's well received, and the feedback we get from not only Williams Homes that we've done a lot of work with over the years of this style and other builders, that it's still trending in a popular solution to farmhouse, not being as traditional. The modern, I'm going to jump to some of the comments. Features appear to be missing from the plans include modern style and differentiation. The 2-story looks very similar to the farmhouse in Spanish elevation, don't appear to be modern. Overhangs that differ from other styles. Exposed roof beam supports, geometric shapes with asymmetrical massing. Smooth exterior plaster, horizontal and vertical elevation plane accentuation with flat roofs. Cantilevered roofs with wide overhangs and or roof decks. So yes, again, this is a different flavor of, say, modern, with a monoslope roof on the Plan 2, and then we have the Plan 5 with the monoslope roof again, with a metal accent roof over the garage door pattern being slightly different. We do have the metal roof over the Plan 4 window above. These additional lines are stucco screeds in the stucco itself to add some of that contemporary nature to it. The exposed beams, we're looking at natural wood posts at the entryways and or porches to get some of that beam look. These do have more traditional roofs in nature, and again, to Nathan's point, the code, especially now this 2022 code with all the basically kind of forcing the hand of builders to go all electric, the solar aspect of it, roofs are getting simpler to allow for those solar panels to take place. So these front to backs or left to right, simple gables, hips are a problem. And as much as we have that on the Spanish out here, hips can be very complicated to get the roof panels to work. So what we're experiencing and what we're having to do in a lot of cases is to provide these overly simplified roofs to primarily allow for that solar. You could argue that you can go to a flat roof, but that doesn't always work either, because if you don't have a big enough footprint, now you have parapet walls that cast shadows, it actually reduces the size of those solar footprint.
So that's not always an easy solution. So again, this is our flavor of modern, and it's been something we've been using, and it's been well received. And that's our approach to the styles that you see before you today.
Thanks, Mark.
Sure.
You've been very patient with us, and I do appreciate that. And I want to preclude by just saying, we're not showing you this as we did everything right and there's no room for changes. I want to present our side. We don't just throw things on the wall. Mike takes a lot of pride in what he does. We sit in rooms. We have worked with city staff over the last 3+ years to go over this. Yes, there's always going to be some difference. Maybe we could add one more gable or one more of this. I understand that. There's not always going to be a perfect plan. And if those are some of the comments that we receive, we're absolutely going to take them to heart and relook at them, right? If we need to add some more arch windows on the Spanish style and there's not enough, we understand that. We just wanted to present where we are at today as well as the presentation. I really appreciate the time tonight. I know it's been long. I would welcome any questions to me. I'm sure you could also ask of Brian as well, but I'm happy to answer any additional questions from what we've shown tonight. So Mike and I are at your guys' service. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions?
A quick question. I know we focused a lot on the front yards and elevations, and looking at the rears, I noticed on, I want to say it's Plan 4, doesn't appear there's a back deck option offered. Is there any reason for that, or
Let's see here.
especially along that Sespe Creek
Yes.
side?
So Plan 4, I believe, did have an optional back deck. Is that correct, Mike? I could be wrong on that. I don't want to misspeak. That was something that we had looked at for the homes on the back of Sespe Creek, that they would have an option to add them. We understand in the market, not everyone wants one, more maintenance, or it takes up shade in the yard, but others do. So without totally misspeaking, Plan 4 does have an optional back deck.
It does, and just for a variety of street scene, you can see on the Plan 3 and the 5, those do show the optional decks. But yes, Plan 4, we showed one without, just so you can compare and contrast, but yes, that would have the same option.
So
That's 3 and 5.
so the actual construction documents for Plan 4 will have that structural option that a buyer could exercise to add that and allow them, so they would not be precluded from that view out Sespe Creek.
Okay, and then just to follow up on that kind of 180, how about line of sights from those balconies into people's backyard privacy? I know that's,
Looking down on your.
yeah, looking down. Yeah, I know that was one of the standards.
That's a valid concern, right?
Absolutely.
That's the negative to that.
No, that's a great question, and
It's
one
hard to
that,
answer.
yeah, because we know what that's like, practicality. Again, plans, and we've done a lot of these, and I'm sure everyone else has, in the sense of, they're always great on paper until you're out there with your neighbor, right?
Yeah, maybe not so much on the, houses abutting Sespe Creek, but, the inland ones that are back to back, where you have deck options and now you're looking into.
No, that's a good question. We're all have different opinions. I would think the ones on Sespe Creek would probably be taken. The ones that are internal, backed up 30, 40 feet from your neighbor, I wouldn't see the practicality of that, but.
I think it's something we can work with on staff on whether we even add that option. They're encouraged
Certain lots.
in the specific plan, right? So we're trying to be in step with the specific plan, but then the question becomes, but do we even want that conflict later on with the livability? And that's always the struggle. Great question. I'm not saying we have an answer. We are trying to meet by showing options on this, so we're within the specific plan guidelines. The question becomes, is that really what we want to prove here or not? And we're just trying to show that we can do it. That's the same thing with the porch setbacks. I think a 10-foot porch would be better than the 6-foot porch, but if it's going to mess with the setback, then we're not able to do it, right? And that's the struggle that we're always at.
Yeah, just to add to that, right, a 10-foot porch means you're taking another 5 feet out of the rear yard as a trade-off if you try to retain that 10 feet and then the 10-foot setback. You're just pushing the house deeper into the lot. It's more concrete
Correct.
on the driveway, so it's a perception of you're losing private space for maybe something that may not get as used as much as we think. Different opinions, right? Yeah.
I live in a neighborhood here that has porches everywhere. When we first moved in, we sat out there all the time. Actually, the only time we sit out there now is when it's fireworks show. So I agree with you that 10-foot would be ideal maybe, but if it's gonna take away 5 feet out of the backyard, I think I'd rather have 5 feet in the backyard.
And we're able to do the 10 feet on the majority of these lots. There are just some that we can't unless we push it back, if that makes sense. And in that case, I think the specific plan is pretty clear that 6 is allowable.
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
I have one more question.
Sure.
If you were able to build these today, what price range are you guys looking at?
Oh.
I know that's tough because the market's down.
Yeah, I'm the wrong guy for that, unfortunately. I don't know because I don't follow our market. I'm all on the front end stuff. So I would say what happens, I know how we look at it. We would look at what's going on currently. Kevin, sorry, remind me of the builder to the south of us.
Well, Bridges?
Bridges, yeah. Yeah. We would look at what they're selling for, square footage. Do we have a premium with the view, which I believe we do, right? Do we not? We'd look at Santa Paula and all the building that's going on there. We would look at what we're selling in Castaic. And then we compare. And that's the only thing you can do is you look at comps in the area, and that dictates where the market is at today. And today's market, if we had come before this commission even last month, would be different, right? And if we had come last year, it would be drastically different. So it's hard to say right now, and I would get in trouble if I probably spoke to that too much. Sorry.
Couple more questions. You mentioned water heater updates in the building code relating to increasing garage sizes. I believe that's where you're going. What are those updates that you reference? Is it?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Are they
It's all-
downsizing? I thought they would go to something like tankless.
Well, right, they did, right? They
Okay.
disappeared, but now the code came out in 2022, and it's what it's asking for or telling the builders to do is to allocate space for that potential hybrid water heater that you may want to put in. So whether the builder puts it in or not, they don't have to. It all comes down to Title 24 and credits and how they want to guide that, but the 3x3 space of a traditional old water heater is back.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's 9 square feet, so that goes into the house, or the garage has to get bigger, so it affects density at some point, and then the battery, the ESS battery backup storage system, that's also required to allocate space for that. Typically, we're seeing 2 big batteries on the wall. Now, you have a minimum garage size like every other jurisdiction. Let's just generically say it's 20 by 20, that's 99% of the time. Jurisdictions don't allow those certain encroachments into that. So if you have a battery that sticks out 6 inches up to 11 inches in some of these batteries, so now you have 20 feet plus that 11 inches. So now your garage just got bigger, either north to south or east to west or both by a foot. So you're looking at a 22 by 20 dimension roughly, plus the water heater. So things are inflating. So when we went tankless and the batteries didn't exist, we were able to get those smaller, but they're getting larger again.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Light pollution, I know it's kind of out in north part of Fillmore. That's a concern in, I think, to residents nearby.
Yes.
Is there a lighting plan you guys will be?
Absolutely.
Turn over to
We're going to require, the city's going to require us to do a lighting plan. We'll have to be annexed into the city's lighting plan, but that's all guided under the North Fillmore specific plan, dark skies, and the downward shield. So whatever we do will have been environmentally looked at and be consistent for that area, and we'll absolutely adhere to that. So if we submit a lighting plan that's didn't pay attention to that, it's going to be rejected by planning.
Okay.
No, it's a good question.
And then lastly, grading. I know this is, I think I read somewhere where it's a overall export project. Trucking, grading activities, noise, what kind of considerations does Williams usually
sure.
take on those kind of?
No, that's a great question, and one we deal with constantly. No 2 projects are the same. Everyone has a little bit different view. We do need, I believe it's import, I believe.
Is it import?
Yeah, it's import. We do need import. Ironically, we've had other builders and other companies call us asking if we need dirt, like they would love dirt right now. Of course, you have to test all that, make sure you're not putting dirty soil on it. We have submitted a remedial grading plan for hopefully approval. That was submitted to the city over a year ago at this point, because we would like to get out there. There is some old weeds, and we'd like to make it less of a fire hazard for the surrounding neighborhoods. It also is an attraction to people who just kind of go out there. I'm sure you're aware, we've had to put concrete. We try to get out there and monitor it. That's a long answer into your question to say that we will distribute, we put signs up, which will have to get approved. Here's our number, call this number anytime. I also believe that in the conditions, the city is asking that we always have somebody on site. Was that correct, Brian? During construction activity, which we do. So we're not shy about putting our corporate number. We put the cell phone on our on-site supervisor, and we absolutely have been complained about. And then we go out there and we meet and we try to fix it. And then we've absolutely got great compliments too, as well.
I think I noticed on the thing that says there's an old oil well out there on the property.
Correct.
Okay, does that gonna go back and be recapped, or?
It will, usually when that happens, yeah, you have to go re-abandon it, even if it already has been. There'll have to be some review, engineering, and we'd have to hire somebody to make sure that everything was done right. So that will be a part of the process as well. That's pretty standard across California anywhere. Even if it's been done before, it has to be re-looked at and make sure that everything's still okay. Yeah, great question.
All right.
Yeah, I actually wanted to piggyback off of the garage dimensions. I think it's pretty common, 20 by 20. You guys mentioned that when everything went like tankless and kind of downsized, what was that new size, the smallest that you could get it to?
You mean a garage size itself?
Correct.
Well, the rule of thumb is to do 20 by 20
Yeah.
because Tahoes and pick a big car, right? Some jurisdictions, like the county of LA, they're 18 by 18.
Okay.
Still, believe it or not. But we at least hold 20 by 20. So it's not that they have to provide a hybrid water heater. It's just the space for it. You can still do tankless. But the code's making the assumption that you as a home buyer, or whoever it is going to want to come in at some point and put that in there. So they're making the builders create that space for it. It's a hypothetical, but you still have to show the space.
Every jurisdiction is different. And whatever that minimum is, we don't always go to because it's not a good selling point, right? Sometimes
It's not practical.
if they allow us to go 20 by 20, even if LA is 18 by 18, we might go 20 by 20 so people feel like they actually aren't scratching their own car as they're pulling it in, right?
Yeah.
It all has to do with how much room you have.
I was just trying to understand if before and during and after, 20 by 20 is still kind of the same size, that it's kind of kept,
That's the
pieces
rules.
were just juggled around.
Yeah, and again, it's these encroachments, these batteries. These batteries, they weigh 400 pounds, and it sticks 11 inches off, hanging on a wall like a picture, right? So that's got to stay clear of those minimum garage stalls. So that's why things are getting wider and bigger. That, again, they don't have to provide the battery. This is a hypothetical that somebody at some point in time will want to put a battery backup system in their garage. So the code is also telling the builder to run all the conduit and raceways, 240 at the range oven, at the dryer, for the hypothetical hybrid water heater. It's one step away from,
Mandate.
these guys just doing it, because
Yeah.
they're putting all the infrastructure in. It's going to be cheaper, the next code, for them to just do it.
Correct. Understood. Thank you.
All right, now, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
The undergrounding of the electricity. I live in the Bridges, and the Edison box is in my front yard. And maybe 2 months ago, it started leaking oil. Is there plans or discussion on where these boxes will be in relative to the units or the houses themselves?
No, that's a great question. That's all a part of when we bring in our Edison plans and submit, we try to discreetly put where our pedestals go and where they're hidden and they're not right in someone's yard if possible, right? And where they go. So yes, that type of plan will be submitted and reviewed through this process, including as a part of the improvement plans.
Okay. The next question is, when was the last time an environmental impact study was done around this area?
Great question. That, and Brian can back this up, but I'll speak to it first and feel free to weigh in, is as a part of the North Fillmore specific plan, they had to do an addendum to the EIR because the 2008 had been old. So the answer is a year ago. A year ago, the city hired Rincon to come do an update to the EIR and what they call an addendum. And it goes through, is this one still correct? Yes. Is the mitigation still in place? Yes. And then we have to adhere, besides our conditions, we have to adhere to those mitigation measures that are identified in that EIR, including the addendum. Is that good enough? And feel free, sorry, Brian.
Yeah, and Nathan's covering that. There's, in general terms, there's a CEQA document that's been prepared. You might be asking specifically about a soils contamination type study when you say environmental report?
Similar to that.
Okay. Yeah, so we have conditions of approval that go along with the remedial grading plan that they talked about. And before they excavate, they'll assess whether there's clean, make sure the soil's clean. And there's mitigation measures that are baked into these conditions, which you don't yet have, that cover those grading aspects.
Okay.
There's air quality, there's dust control, there's a haul route that's identified, and they have to bring in clean soil. And they have, before they even dig into the dirt, they have to assess whether there's been any contamination that has to be remediated first.
Okay.
So you'll see that in the conditions, and you're bringing up good points. And we'll be fine tuning these as we go, taking into everything you're saying here into consideration.
Okay.
I can talk about those a little bit more if you want me to elaborate.
Absolutely.
Okay. Just on some of the points that that you've mentioned in the architecture, we realize there are some constraints and they are meeting density. There are diagrams in the North Fillmore specific plan we urge you to take a look at. There's different options in there for garages. You mentioned porches, offsetting rear yards. There may be some opportunities to add variety. Maybe there's a homeowner who wants a bigger yard or a homeowner that wants a bigger porch. I don't know if that's something they might want to consider. And that also gives you a street scene where there's articulation and where I'm not an architect, but articulation of how the buildings are lining up in the street perhaps, and capture, both aspects of the market demand for that. If you're limited in view sheds because of privacy and things like that, there's options for porches. You might look at having those rear yard balconies be really more ironed in when you're backed up along Sespe Creek, and maybe those can fetch a premium. Of course, the market has to bear all of this out. Lighting, we do have dark sky night lighting standards. You'll notice around town we have what we call the Fillmorean. It's a decorative light. It's a throwback traditional light, and it has a dark sky top. And those are evident down in the Rio Vista Park area and along the bridge down there. So there'll be dark sky compliant light. They'll produce a photometric plan. We'll make sure there's no spillover into Sespe Creek. That will hopefully appease any of the biological concerns and also ensure that you still have that night sky view. Grading, I mentioned. There's a remedial grading plan. We'll have a haul route, dust control measures, soils. They even have to check whether there is any birds nesting in the trees before they go there. They'll have to make sure that their vibration from their earth moving equipment doesn't affect our well. Speaking of wells, there's an old oil well, and those are capped in accordance with state CalGEM, used to be called Dogger, and they have requirements for how those are filled in. They're basically concrete filled, and they'll come out and revisit that. It's all done per state standards. That's also baked into the conditions of approval that you'll be getting. And I think that covered most of your questions. Undergrounding, we'll also have a look at what Edison's plans are going to look like, so we can help spot where those vaults are going to be. And I think if any other questions you guys have, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I've got one more about wildlife itself. We were back, we discussed a bike path in the back. Obviously, I live in the bridges with the bike path in the back. Came across an outline the other day. Is there any measures in place for the wildlife itself? And I'm not saying build a bridge like they're doing over the 101, but is there some type of avenue, because we're continuing to push into nature to try to get wildlife back to keep them away from these roads?
Yeah, the primary migration corridor is going to be coming down Sespe Creek. So they'll have a wall up, obviously, to be, 6-foot block or 8-foot block, depending if fire gets that, which hopefully will prevent a lot of the wildlife from coming over into those neighborhoods. This is really kind of it's surrounded by urban area, and this is one of the last few areas that the city has to meet its housing requirements that Nathan mentioned. And the county oversees a lot of the biological wildlife migration corridors. This is not a biological migration corridor. This is earmarked for development. Those corridors, I can get you those plans if you'd like. They are out into the county areas surrounding the city limits. Yeah.
The reason I ask is, one, with the mountain lion that we saw just like 2 nights ago, and then going up the 23 into Moore Park, we're seeing more and more wildlife
Sure.
going who knows where. But it's a great question, and hopefully there's, and you mentioned it, a plan in place to try to mitigate the contact between human and animal.
Yeah, I think some of the animals are making a comeback, and so we're starting to see more movement. I'm not a biologist, but just in tracking some of where that discipline's going. And so perhaps there is a little more interface between humans and wildlife, but that's part of living out here. That's what we expect. We have coyotes, we have snakes, we have it all. So we would just have other features, and we can talk to the fire department about, safety measures, and anybody new moving into town. Maybe we could look at having, some kind of education about wildlife and making sure they're not feeding the wildlife. And maybe Nathan can speak more to that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Brian, is we already are conditioned to doing our CCNRs, meaning every owner will get a pamphlet about the Amron Light Company to the south about the noise factor. That's something the city's asking us to do, right? Because we want to be upfront to our future buyers that, hey, there is a light factor right down, and sometimes there's noise, and you need to be aware of that. Full disclosure. That's something, if the commission wanted to ask, is be aware of wildlife. We've done pamphlets like that before. I'm sure the city has asked other applicants to do it. We absolutely could. And Commissioner, you're not wrong on the location of this. If you look at this, right, we do have Sespe Creek, which is an avenue. Now, I don't want to say argue, but I will point out that there is a pretty massive levee here, right, of the concrete, right, but we know wildlife can go over that, and absolutely think it's appropriate to add some sort of literature to future home buyers so they would be aware in the eyes of full disclosure, which we are doing for, again, the Amron Light Station right here, because chances are they could hear noise at time, including we have a higher wall on this side for these backyards to help reduce the noise there. So that's a great point to bring up.
Yeah, perfect, thank you. I just think that as long as we get all the Ts crossed and Is dotted, some of the people that live out here, I know a couple of my neighbors will tell you they've lived out here 10 years and never seen it. When they told me, they called me a liar, and I showed them the pictures, and so it was very interesting. But I personally think I've done some of the P22 stuff. I think it's great to make sure that we advise of, it could be anything, really. And that's all that I have. Any other questions? No? Okay. So we will continue.
So at this point, just for the record, I don't know if anybody's here for public comment, but you'd be opening the public comment period, taking any public comment if there's anybody to speak on the project to make comments.
Is there anybody from the public? No? Okay.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
Please look at the adoption of the building code last night that the city of Fillmore did. We do allow you to have natural gas to your house if you want it. You're not required to go all electric. We've also made some 4 or 5 specific requirements just to Fillmore. I know this is going to be related to your construction documents, but please look at your drainage lines, because we changed the codes for City of Fillmore pertaining to that, and fire sprinklers in porches and other areas. So please get a copy of that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kevin, for that. So we will continue the public hearing to the next planning commission meeting to be held on April 15th of 2023.
So
Yes.
what would the, so first we close the public hearing?
Oh,
And
yes.
then if there's any commissioner discussion or deliberations that can happen, comments for the applicant to consider before. And then at that point, then the commission would consider a motion to continue.
Okay. So I hear none, no other public members here. Okay, hearing none. Is there any other comments or questions from the commissioners? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. Again, any other questions from the commissioners? No? All right, then, we need a motion for the,
Yeah, so at this point, it would be a motion. There was, Brian brought up obviously the staff recommendation. The staff report was till April 15th. I don't know if that's sufficient time to bring back the plan, make the revisions, but it's up to the planning commission to do the staff recommendation, the report, or a different date. That just as a note for the new commissioners, if the practical impact of continuing to a date certain, like say April 15th or the May Planning Commission meeting, is that the project doesn't have to be renoticed. If it's continued to a date uncertain, then the staff would have to send out the notices again. So that is just a practical difference to consider. And that applies for any other project you might have in front of you going forward too.
I would like to make a motion to continue the public hearing to the next meeting, which is, I believe, April 15th, 2023.
okay, there's a first, a second?
Second?
Okay, first and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No, hearing none, okay. That will be continued until April 15th. Here in council chambers. Throw it out there, right? All right. We will move on to number 7, the business items. They are none under the business items. Number 8, reports and communications. 8A, planning and community development director. Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
I don't have any comments. I'll take any questions you may have.
Any questions for Kevin? No? Okay, we'll move on to 8B, Planning Commission brief reports. Does any commissioners have any brief reports they would like to give? No? Okay. Number 9, the adjournment. The Planning Commission, we will adjourn. Oh, let me make a motion. Do we need a motion for that? No? All right, so the Planning Commission will adjourn. The regular commission meeting is the next regular, okay, let me back up because the date, can we get clarification on the date? Because one shows April 15th, the packet shows April 19th.
I want to say 19th is Wednesday. 19th is Wednesday.
Third Wednesday of the month.
All right,
19th.
all right, so April 19th. Okay, so the Planning Commission adjourns to the Planning Commission regular meeting scheduled for April 19th at 6:30 in City Council chambers. Thank you.